the San Francisco 49ers just admitted a big issue that they have. In fact, they admitted two major issues that need to be solved. I'm excited to see the team take a little bit more ownership on how the season has gone so far, and I'm excited to break it down with you in this video. If you're new here, I'm Nate. I make daily 49ers content. Please consider subscribing if that's what you're looking for. But let's start with a really interesting take from Rohan Chakravarthy, Niners Nation. Really interesting topic on this one, talking about the run defense. Then we're going to get into the ownership that the team is taking regarding it, namely Kyle Shanahan. So starting with, of course, a reminder that the team lost Eric Armstead and did not really have much of an interior presence on the roster other than maybe Javon Hargrave, who still hasn't really been who everyone hoped he'd be, but he's not really a classic run defender anyways. You lose him for the whole season before the season even begins, and you're just looking at what do we have here in terms of defensive tackles, in terms of interior defensive line. And here's what Rohan said here. Really interesting point. I've also expressed concerns, but the team's defensive scheme is without a space eater in the middle, it's easier for teams to run against the wide nine, giving the spacing available to rushing lanes. But when you look at the numbers, the run defense has been alarming in the losses. In San Francisco's 5 wins this season, they've allowed an average of 71.8 rushing yards per game. That's pretty good. In 7 losses, the number skyrockets to 154.3 yards, highlighted by their rough performance against the Buffalo Bills, where they gave up 220 yards on the ground. Now, Rohan, of course, is not the only one who's noticed this, and fantastic article, all the credit to him, and appreciate his perspective a lot of times. But Kyle Shanahan himself talked about this. You may remember this. The bottom line is we haven't played good enough run defense, Kyle Shanahan said the other day. You look at all of our losses. These last 2 weeks have been as bad as it gets, especially when you give up the run game like we have in these last 2 weeks. In the first half, the game's almost over before it starts going into the second half. I want to tell you before I continue reading on, I have more here from Kyle Shanahan too. This felt so good as a fan. It felt so good to hear your leader go up there and admit very clearly what we've all been thinking and what we've all been saying, what we've all been experiencing as a fan. It feels like this game's going to get away because we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. And if you start off really slow, it makes it 10 times harder. And that's not the 49er way. That's just not the culture that has been set here of a team that starts strong and builds points out early and makes it really hard to come back from. When the 49ers are up and have a big lead, traditionally incredibly difficult to beat. This season, not so much. Continuing on, I still thought we had every chance to make it a game in the second half, but that's when we had our 3 turnovers in both games, which leads to blowouts. I was just talking to a Packers fan literally today, like maybe an hour ago. I was talking to a Packers fan at work and just discussing this exact issue here and the way that the 49ers were still in that Green Bay game. And maybe some concerns from a Green Bay point of view. They were not that great against the 49ers. And yet the 49ers, of course, multiple turnovers ruining the game. Kyle continues, though. He says this: if you look at all of our losses this year, I think the least amount of yards we've given up in a loss is close to 150. So we haven't been stopping the run well enough. That starts with people being out of gaps. It can go to missed tackles. It can go to not getting off the field on third down so they get a few more runs called. It can go to not getting enough turnovers, and it can go to missed assignments. So it's all above. It's been a while. What's the phrase everyone likes to say? It's been a minute. I kind of actually don't like that phrase, but it's been a while since I've heard Kyle Shanahan be this honest about the errors on this team. I mean, he just listed it out. And I feel like we mentioned it. We talked about it because early in the week, Kyle Shanahan, took a little bit of ownership as a coaching staff. It's on us, that kind of stuff. And he just hasn't really done a whole lot of that. But this feels like, he's really listing out what needs to be done here. And I respect that Kyle has done that, because it's really, really important that you understand the problem you're trying to fix when you're trying to fix it. It's important to know, I think, as a fan, that your head coach knows what's wrong and is aiming at fixing it. That's one of the biggest dings on Matt Eberflus over at Chicago. Well, no longer at Chicago, because every time he would double down before the game, he would triple down after the game. I heard someone, a Bears fan, say that recently in a podcast. Like, that's bad. That's a bad situation. You want your head coach to recognize the problems, right? Well, here we go. Big picture stats. I pulled up a bunch of stats, and these are all in relationship to the opponents we've played. So this is not 49ers up against the entire league. This is 49ers up against the teams you've played, just the teams you've played. And I'll be honest with you, there have been some bad teams in that mix, but here we go. Big picture stats. We are -3 on the turnover ratio. That just happened. These last 2 weeks, you knocked that out. We were actually positive on the turnover ratio, but it's clearly an issue that needs solving. We are -9 in touchdowns compared to our opponents. -9. That is bad. That is really bad, especially when you look at the yards and how even we are on a lot of those stats. To be -9 in the red zone is an issue. -7 in rush TDs, which tells you a huge part of the whole story, doesn't it? Doesn't it tell you who the 49ers have been? Doesn't it tell you what the 49ers have been like this season, not being able to run the ball up the gut and over the stinking line? It feels like a big defining factor. When I look back now, I think that's a big deal. And of course, JP Mason, coughs up the fumble is the one that sticks out in my mind on the goal line. That would have been a touchdown. We saw Kyle Juszczyk do the exact same thing in what probably could have been a touchdown, or at least was going to be close to a touchdown just this last weekend. I mean, it's just crazy. We're coughing up rush TDs like crazy. We're -3 in sacks. It just tells you how often they're getting after our quarterback. And I'll be honest, that stat is actually better than it should be, because Brock Purdy this season has done a really good job escaping the pocket. At times, he's still taking hits and taking sacks and stuff, and not perfect, of course, but he's done a pretty darn good job, I think, escaping the pocket, escaping the pressure, that kind of thing. He's definitely looked a lot different than when we saw Brendan Allen in there 2 weeks ago, and we're like, oh, wow. Yeah, you are getting something different out of Brock Purdy and his escapability. But still, -24 yards and sacks. It's also it tells the story on the other side of the ball of how little we're actually getting after the other team. And this is supposed to be a number 2 rated defensive line coming into the season. Granted, I understand. Javon Hargrave gone. Nick Bosa gone. I understand that. But I'm just saying that's how the expectations went into the season. The final one, we are +11, which obviously you don't want to be plus when it comes to penalties. You want to be negative when it comes to penalties. We are +11 in penalties over our opponents. These are big picture stats that this far in the season, I feel like, tell a really big part of the story. The 49ers have been undisciplined. The 49ers have had bad run defense. The 49ers have been bad in the red zone. You see it all right here on the screen. It just, the math is as simple as it gets. The 49ers need to be better, and they'll have an opportunity against the Chicago Bears to do it. Here is Hufanga Magic Club text from last video still on the screen. Here's Rohan's end to his article that I thought was really nice and kind of sets up, closes out nice the show for where he was at, where I'm kind of trying to end here, which is the Chicago Bears. The 49ers have a chance to win a favorable matchup this weekend, as the Chicago Bears have rushed for over 100 yards just once in their last 5 games. If they can hold Chicago to that mark once again, their defense should be able to generate enough stops to give the team a good chance to win on Sunday. But as it has been with the defense all year long, getting that consistency can be unpredictable. And you know what? It's still all to play for. 2 days left. Somehow we're still in this playoff race. I'm not even holding on to hope for the playoffs. I mean, I guess I am a little bit, but I really am just like back where I've been the last 3 weeks. Like, I just want to see good football. I just want to see 4 quarters, 3 phases. Give me all of it one time this season, please, all together. Fred Warner said it best. Fred just said the other day on his podcast, like, we just have to go get a win and get the vibe back, or something like that. Like, that's what we need. We need to go get a win. We need to play good, solid, full team football where all 48 are involved in the right ways. And then we need to go on and build off of that and forget about forget about whether or not we're going to make the playoffs, because it's out of our hands now. I mean, even if we win out, it's still out of our hands. It's still only like a 82% chance of getting in the playoffs. That's bad. You win out and you still only have an 82% chance. I think you still do it, because I think that 82% chance, you're going to be beating the Arizona Cardinals. You're going to be beating the Los Angeles Rams. But, I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. The 49ers need to think about the game on Sunday, 2 days away. That's all they need to worry about. They need to go out there and put together one solid 4-quarter performance. That's what Fred Warner's been calling for from the very beginning of the season. 4 quarters, 4 quarters, 4 quarters. That's what we need to see. I'm hoping to see it. Either way, I'm going to be here making daily content, so make sure you subscribe and don't miss out on all of the fun.